My entire life was flipped upside down the day my parents sat me down and announced they were divorcing. When I was 12, I believed that divorces were reserved for argumentative couples. You know, the ones who shouted about money and banged doors. However, my parents were always quite courteous to one another. I assumed they were simply busy, even though it had been a long time since we had gone on a family trip. "Candy," my mother responded in an oddly serene tone. "Your father and I have something to tell you." I sat on the couch and watched them, keeping a safe distance from one another. Dad cleared his throat. He declared, "We've decided to get divorced," as if he were announcing that we would be eating pizza for supper. In anticipation of the joke, I blinked, but it never materialized. "But why?" was what I eventually managed to get out. Mom stroked my hand as she reached out. "Sweetheart, sometimes people grow apart. I've discovered other individuals who I want to be with, along with your father." Dad gave a nod. "I'm about to move out. You will live with your mother, but occasionally you will also stay with me." I sat there attempting to take in this shocking revelation. What was I meant to do while my parents were splitting up for other people? Accept it. Who are these other people? My voice sounded distant and little as I asked. For the first time, I saw that Mom's grin fell short of her eyes. "You'll get to meet them shortly. Both of my friends' daughters are around your age. Wouldn't that be pleasant?" Nice. I was supposed to think it was good that my parents were blowing apart our family. Dad went on to say, "And my partner has a son," as if to sweeten the pot. I sprang to my feet, almost toppling the coffee table. I don't want any more siblings. I desire that we remain together. I hurried to my room, threw myself on the bed, and closed the door. Downstairs, I could hear them conversing softly, most likely trying to figure out how to further reorganize my existence. I reflected on how Mom and Dad had taken me out individually during the past few months. One Saturday, Dad and I would go to the movies, and the next weekend, Mom and I would go to a cafe. Having one-on-one time with each of them struck me as cool. I now understood that it was only the beginning. The weeks that followed flew by. After packing his things, Dad left to live with his new bride. They had apparently already been married in a brief ceremony. As Dad had predicted, she had a boy. We moved in with Mom's new spouse in the interim. A year younger than me, he brought his twin daughters. I was a little excited at first. I'd always wanted a sister to chat to late at night about life, boys, and other things, and to share secrets with. I made an effort to be amiable the day they moved in. "Hello, Aunt Candy," I said with a smile to the females. "Do you want me to give you a tour?" The taller one, Brittany, I believe, gave me a wide-eyed stare as if I were something stuck to her shoe. "No thanks," she responded in a contemptuous tone. "We don't need your help." Her sister gave her a nod of approval. "Yes, and we are not your sisters, just to be clear. You're just too much." I felt like I was slapped across the face by the burn. They pushed by me, laughing to themselves, and I remained there, gaping. I listened to the noises of my new family getting settled as I lay in bed that night. I was unfamiliar with my own house. Things worsened the next day. The twins were dressed like me when I got home from school. "Hey," I said, startled. "Those are mine." Brittany gave an eye roll. "We could borrow them," Mom suggested. "Stop being so self-centered." I turned to my mother for support, but she only grinned. "Now sharing is caring, Candy. All the females desire is to be accepted." Greetings. One of my fave shirts was on them. I fought back tears as I stomped up to my room. It became evident over the next few days that I was no longer Mom's world. She lavished the twins with new toys and clothing. My belongings began to vanish. They were handed away to my new sisters without my consent. One day, I overheard Mom talking to her new husband. "The girls need new phones," she was saying. "We could use the money we set aside for Candy's birthday." My birthday? She was going to skip my birthday for them. When the day came, Mom barely remembered. "Oh, honey," she said distractedly when I reminded her. "I'm so sorry, but the girls have a big sports event today. We'll celebrate another time, okay?" But we never did. I thought things might be better at Dad's place, where I stayed every other weekend, but I was wrong about that too. Dad's new wife was pregnant, and she had no time for me and her son. He was a nightmare. One night, I woke up to a tickling sensation on my face. I opened my eyes and saw a huge spider sitting on my nose. I screamed, flailing around in panic. The whole house came running as the lights flicked on. I saw it wasn't a real spider, but a plastic toy, and there was Dad's stepson grinning in the doorway. "What's going on?" Dad's wife demanded, her pregnant belly leading the way as she waddled into the room. Candy woke us all up with her screaming. The boy said innocently over the toy, "You little..." I started, but Dad's wife cut me off. "Honestly, Candy, what is wrong with you? Are you some kind of hysterical lunatic?" I turned to Dad, expecting him to defend me, but he just stood there looking uncomfortable. "He put it there," I insisted. "He knows I'm afraid of spiders." "Don't be ridiculous," his wife snapped. "Stop lying and go to sleep. I don't want to see you for the rest of the night." I looked at Dad again, silently begging him to say something, anything, but he just sighed and said, "I'll take you home in the morning, Candy." As they all filed out, leaving me alone in the dark, I realized something. I didn't have a home anymore. I was alone. Life at Mom's house didn't get any better. The twins, emboldened by Mom's constant praise and attention, became downright cruel. One afternoon, I came home to find my favorite mug shattered on the kitchen floor. The twins were standing there, looking innocent as angels. "Oh, Candy," Brittany said, her voice syrupy sweet. "We're so sorry. We were just trying to make you some tea, and it slipped." I knew it was a lie. They'd never done anything nice for me, let alone make me tea. But before I could say anything, Mom and my stepdad walked in. "What's going on here?" Mom asked. Candy broke her mug, the other twin piped up. She got angry and smashed it. My stepdad's face darkened. Without a word, he grabbed my arm and led me to the small storage room at the end of the hall. It was dark and musty, filled with old boxes and forgotten junk. "You'll stay in here until you learn to control your temper," he said, pushing me inside. But I didn't do anything. I cried, but he just shut the door, leaving me in darkness. I heard giggling outside the door. It was the twins. "Hey, Candy," one of them called through the wood. "Did you know this room is full of spiders? Big, hairy ones that come out in the dark." I huddled in the corner, trying not to panic. I knew they were lying, but the darkness seemed to crawl around me. Every little sound made me jump. Hours passed. Nobody came to let me out, not even Mom. When the door finally opened, it was morning. Mom stood there looking tired. "I hope you've learned your lesson," she said. "Now get ready for school." I tried to tell her what really happened, but she just waved me off. That was when I realized Mom would always believe them over me. I started spending more and more time at my Aunt Sarah's house. She was Dad's sister, and she lived with her husband, Uncle Tom. They didn't have kids of their own, so they were always happy to see me. At first, I just visited for a few hours after school, but those hours turned into days, and soon I was spending weeks at a time with them. One day, after I'd been at Aunt Sarah's for almost a month, my teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, showed up at Mom's house for a home visit. I wasn't there, of course, but I heard about it later from a neighbor kid who saw the whole thing. Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on the door, looking concerned. When Mom answered, the teacher asked to see me. "Oh, Candy's with her father," Mom said dismissively. Mrs. Rodriguez frowned. "That's odd. I just called Mr. Johnson, and he said Candy was living with you." Mom's face went pale. "What?" But I thought. Mrs. Rodriguez was furious. She contacted Child Protective Services, and before I knew it, we were all headed to court. I sat in the courtroom, now 14 years old, watching as my parents argued over who should take care of me. Me. But it wasn't the kind of argument I'd expected. "You take her," Dad shouted at Mom. "I have a small child. I don't have time for a teenager." Mom scoffed. "Are you kidding? I have a life now. I can't deal with Candy's drama." I sat there, feeling smaller and smaller as they tossed me back and forth like a hot potato. Neither of them wanted me. But then Aunt Sarah stood up. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and strong. "If I may, Tom and I would like to take custody of Candy." The courtroom went silent. I looked at Aunt Sarah in shock. She smiled at me, then turned back to the judge. She handed some papers to the judge. "These documents show our financial stability. I'm a teacher and Tom's a doctor. We can provide for Candy in every way." The judge looked over the papers, then looked at me. "Candy," he said gently, "you're old enough to have a say in this. Who do you want to live with?" I didn't hesitate. "Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom," I said, my voice shaking but certain. I saw the relief on my parents' faces. They didn't even try to hide it. Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new life. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom weren't just taking care of me. They were parenting me. They asked about my day, helped me with my homework, and actually listened when I talked. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Uncle Tom asked, "So, Candy, what should we call each other now that we're officially your guardians?" I thought for a moment. These people had shown me more love in a few weeks than my own parents had in years. "Could I call you Mom and Dad?" I asked hesitantly. Aunt Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, sweetie, we'd be honored." From that day on, they were Mom and Dad to me. My birth parents became distant memories, people I thought about less and less as time went on. My new life wasn't just about Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom. Though I also got to know Uncle Tom's mother, my new grandmother. She lived nearby and quickly became one of my favorite people in the world. Grandma was a retired doctor, and she had this way of making everything interesting. We'd spend hours in her garden, planting vegetables and flowers while she told me stories about her days in the hospital. I realized I also wanted to become a doctor. With Grandma's help and the unwavering support of my new parents, I threw myself into my studies. Before I knew it, it was time for high school graduation. As I stood in my cap and gown, scanning the audience, I saw the faces of the people who truly mattered. Mom, Dad, and Grandma, all beaming with pride. My birth parents weren't there. They hadn't even sent a card. I applied to medical college and, to my delight, got accepted on a full scholarship. Life was good. I had a loving family, a clear goal, and a bright future ahead of me. 3 years flew by in a whirlwind of lectures, late-night study sessions, and clinical rotations. Every time I put on my white coat, I felt a surge of pride knowing I was living the dream Grandma had helped nurture. That's why, when Mom and Aunt Sarah called me that rainy Tuesday afternoon, I knew something was terribly wrong before she even spoke. "Candy, honey," she said, her voice cracking. "It's Grandma. She's gone." The world stopped spinning. Grandma gone. It couldn't be. We had plans to review my latest paper this weekend. She was supposed to be at my graduation in a year. The next few days passed in a blur of tears and hushed conversations as we prepared for the funeral. I stood between Mom and Dad, Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom, feeling like a little girl again, lost and scared. But then came the reading of the will. To my beloved granddaughter, Candy, the lawyer read, I leave my entire estate, including my house and all my savings, amounting to $1,980,000. I gasped, looking around the room in shock. This had to be a mistake. But Mom and Dad were nodding, small smiles on their tear-stained faces. Grandma talked to us about this, Dad explained later. She wanted to make sure you had a solid foundation for your future. We agreed it was the right thing to do. As the dust settled and I tried to come to terms with my newfound wealth, life threw me another curveball. My phone started ringing with unfamiliar numbers. When I finally answered one, I nearly dropped the phone in shock. Candy, hi, it's your mother. I hadn't heard her voice in years, but before I could respond, she rushed on. I've been thinking about you so much lately. How are you? Where are you studying? We should catch up. Over the next few days, similar calls came in from my birth father. Suddenly, they were both intensely interested in my life, asking to meet, talking about how much they missed me. Confused and a little suspicious, I mentioned it to Mom and Dad over dinner one night. To my surprise, they burst out laughing. Oh, Candy, Mom said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. I hate to say it, but I think they might have caught wind of your inheritance. Part of me wanted to ignore them, to pretend I'd never gotten those calls, but another part, a part I had long since buried, was curious. What would it be like to see them again? To show them the woman I'd become without their help? Maybe I should meet them, I said slowly, just to see what they want. Mom and Dad exchanged a look. If that's what you want to do, we'll support you, Mom said. But be careful, sweetie. People can surprise you, and not always in a good way. The next day, I found myself standing on the familiar porch of my childhood home. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. The door swung open, and there she was, my birth mother. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Candy, she breathed, her eyes welling up with tears. Oh, my baby girl. She pulled me into a hug that felt stiff and awkward. Over her shoulder, I could see my stepfather and the twins hovering in the background, plastered with smiles on their faces. Come in, my mother urged, ushering me inside. Dinner was a strange affair. The twins were sickeningly sweet, a far cry from the cruel girls I remembered. We're so glad you're here, Candy, one of them simpered. I think we've missed you so much. I caught the flash of irritation in her eyes that brightened her words, but I just smiled and nodded. As we ate, the conversation took a turn. My mother glanced around the dining room, sighing dramatically. This old house, she said, shaking her head. It's seen better days, hasn't it? The roof needs replacing, and don't even get me started on the plumbing. I took a sip of water, saying nothing. My stepfather chimed in, and of course, with the girls heading to college soon, well, you know how expensive that can be. I pretended to be very interested in my mashed potatoes. It's such a shame, my mother continued, her voice dripping with fake concern. The girls are so bright, but with our financial situation, she trailed off, looking at me expectantly. I met her gaze evenly, but said nothing. The silence stretched on, growing more uncomfortable by the second. Finally, I decided to change the subject. So I said brightly, I've been wondering, what grades did I graduate high school with? I can't quite remember. The color drained from my mother's face. She opened and closed her mouth a few times, looking like a fish out of water. Well, that is, it was so long ago. Well, my version was completely confirmed. She didn't know anything about my life, my achievements, or my struggles. All she knew was that I had money now. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "I think I know why you invited me here," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "It's about my inheritance, isn't it?" The room went silent. My stepfather's face turned red, and the twins suddenly found their plates very interesting. "How can you say that?" My mother gasped, but her eyes gave her away. There was no warmth there, no motherly love, just calculation and disappointment. "Now, Candy," my stepfather started, but I cut him off. "No, I'm done here. Don't contact me again." And with that, I walked out into the cool night air, leaving behind the echoes of their angry shouts and my own past. I didn't need their approval or their love. I had a real family waiting for me at home. Just a few days later, I found myself standing at my father's front door. The door swung open, revealing my stepmother. Her face contorted into what I assumed was meant to be a welcoming smile, but looked more like she'd just bitten into a lemon. I forced a smile back and stepped inside. As we moved into the living room, I noticed a teenage boy lounging on the couch. He looked up as we entered, and I recognized him instantly, the spider thrower. He had grown up quite a bit, and to my surprise, he gave me a genuinely friendly smile. "Hey, Candy," he said, standing up. "Long time no see. I'm Jake, in case you forgot." Before I could respond, a whirlwind of pigtails and glitter burst into the room. A little girl, no more than 8, skidded to a stop in front of me, her eyes wide. "Who are you?" she demanded. My father, looking older and more tired, cleared his throat. "Lily, this is your sister, Candy." We settled into an awkward conversation, my stepmother peppering me with questions about my life that I answered as vaguely as possible. Jake, surprisingly, seemed genuinely interested, asking about my medical studies with what appeared to be real curiosity. As the evening wore on, I could feel the conversation steering towards the real reason for this reunion. My father kept glancing at my stepmother, who would nod slightly, urging him on. Finally, he cleared his throat. "So, Candy," he began, his voice overly casual, "we heard about your windfall." I tensed, waiting for what was coming next. "You know, Lily here is quite the little genius," he continued. "We've been thinking of sending her to this prestigious private school, but, well, it's not cheap." I said nothing, my face carefully blank. My stepmother jumped in. "What your father is trying to say, Candy, is that we could use some help for Lily's future. You understand." I took a deep breath, feeling my patience wearing thin. "Why now?" I asked, looking directly at my father. "Why are you only remembering me now that I have money?" The room went deadly silent. Even Lily, who had been playing with her dolls, seemed to sense the tension. My father started to stammer out an excuse, but my stepmother's face suddenly twisted with anger. "Now you listen here," she hissed, all pretense of kindness gone. "You're obligated to help your family. If you don't, we'll take you to court. We'll demand our share of that money you owe us." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "Actually," I said, standing up, "according to the law, you're not my family at all. You abandoned me, remember? Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom are my legal parents now." As I walked out the door, I heard my stepmother's shrill voice and my father's angry shouts, but I didn't look back. I got into my car and drove away, feeling a mix of emotions, sadness, anger, but mostly relief. In the days following my visit to my birth parents, my phone buzzed incessantly. Calls, texts, and voicemails poured in from both of them, each more desperate than the last. "Candy, please," my mother's voice pleaded in one message. "We're about to lose the house. We'll be on the streets. Don't you care?" My father's approaches ranged from guilt-tripping to outright demands. After everything we've done for you, one text read, "This is how you repay us." I let them all go unanswered. I focused instead on my studies, throwing myself into my final year of college with renewed determination. I was studying a really complicated cardiology textbook one evening when a strange call appeared on my phone. With hesitation, I replied, "Hi, Candy. Jake is here. You know, I suppose you're a stepbrother." Now, I realize this is strange, but I wanted to express my regret for the spider incident that occurred years ago. It was a really poor decision. In spite of everything, I couldn't help but smile. "That was a long time ago, Jake. Water under the bridge." "Really, no," he emphasized. For years, I felt guilty about it. I intended to apologize sooner, but you never returned. Furthermore, I assure you that this has nothing to do with money. I suppose I simply wanted you to know that I've grown out of that dumb child. It was heartwarming how sincere he was. "Thanks for that, Jake." Actually, in the end, we spoke for more than an hour. Jake was an engineering student in his first year of college. He wasn't the spoiled child I recalled. Instead, he was humorous and self-deprecating. We had decided to get coffee together the following week at the conclusion of the call. Jake and I became true friends as the months went by. Finding a connection with someone from my previous life was odd, but it was satisfying. He became a pillar of support in my life, and we frequently got together for study sessions or coffee. In the meantime, my life was accelerating at an uncontrollable rate. When I eventually stepped on stage and accepted my college graduation, the long nights and difficult tests were worthwhile. I noticed Mom, Dad, and Jake applauding enthusiastically as I peered out into the crowd. Joy and appreciation filled my heart. Eventually, my biological parents' messages became less frequent. Jake informed me that they were having financial difficulties, but I stayed away. It was just an acknowledgement that we were on separate paths, no longer motivated by resentment or hatred. I was having coffee with Jake one day when he brought up his younger sister. "Lily, my half-sister. She's very intelligent," he said. "I read constantly and have questions about everything. But my stepmother and father, not that they're promoting it." I remembered the bright-eyed young girl I had met a moment before. I answered slowly, perhaps I could assist her with her schooling. Create a fund for college or anything. For her, not for them. I thought back on the path that had led me here as I drove home that night. The suffering, the desertion, the surprise inheritance. All of it had brought me to this point. Now I was Dr. Candy Johnson, and I had a promising career in medicine. I had the resources to change the life of a little girl, a loving family, and a real friend in Jake.